So I just thought it would be great to talk about this even further with someone who does this professionally, Louise Mowbray. Louise Mowbray is a international coach and speaker. She's an ICF qualified coach, a qualified consciousness coach, and she does personal branding for individuals and for corporates as well. Louise, good morning, and thank you very much for joining us.
Good morning, Niki. Thanks for having me.
So that is the trick, isn't it? Being in the present moment. It's a lovely concept.
Yes, it sounds like a wonderful concept.
I'd love to be there.
And it sounds very much like, I'm on a mountaintop. You know, that one would have to be in a special place to be able to do
exactly.
that. But saying that, one can achieve that through various conscious awarenesses, becoming more consciously aware on a day-to-day basis, more and more often, so that we become more conscious than not. And it takes, I guess, a real curiosity and a passionate determination to do so, and an awareness so that you catch yourself when you are unconscious.
But why is it important to be conscious? I mean, I've just said to you, just on a very personal level, when you're looking at family, you have passage of time, and therefore you want to really suck the marrow out of each moment. But if you're looking in terms of the bigger picture as well, why is it so important, and why is everyone talking about living consciously and mindfully?
Well, I think we'll come back to the individual bit in a minute, but I think that the change in the world economy has really kicked this off to a flying start. So I think what's actually happening now, a lot of the work that I do within corporates, is developing conscious leaders to drive conscious business, to drive conscious capitalism. And I don't think that that's necessarily happened because we are suddenly all wanting to sit on the mountaintop and go on. I think it's happened out of pure and utter necessity. If we look around at the world today, just switch on the television today and flip through not only the local channels, but go through CNN and the BBC and Sky News and have a look at what is occurring. It's quite an extraordinary time. And if we look at the collapse of the world's most trusted financial institutions and governments and countries, we are seeing a whole evolution happening right before our eyes. So what's happened is the average person has now put their foot down and said, I don't want to do business with organizations that don't care about people. Yep.
Okay.
So we've gone from just consuming labels, the flashy, blingy type environment, which can survive in a good economy. We've seen that. We've had a real run of that over the years, to a situation where we just won't stand for it. When we know how many people are suffering around the world in very, very difficult economic climates, we just won't stand for it. So I know, I don't know about you, but when I go and buy a product, I want to know that that organization is not using slave trade, or it's not coming out of a politically tough environment that I actually don't agree with, a regime that exists. I won't buy it.
So are you saying that is the trend? So when you're talking about conscious corporates, conscious MDs, it's clean business.
Yes.
Is that what you mean by? Is that
and it's out of necessity, because consumers will not go with all. We're becoming much more informed. We talk about, and you just mentioned, if you want to get hold of us, you can do it in this way and that way and the next way. It's all electronic. And we are suddenly aware of things that we might not have been aware of before, because technology and electronics and what have you allow that. And if we just think of our children from the age of 1 can grab onto an iPhone and find their favorite song and have
easily.
a biggie. It's outrageous. Okay, there's an amazing chap called Dan Tapscott behind Wiconomics, and I went to go and listen to him a couple of years ago in London, and his foundation spent $5 million on researching the neural pathways of young people today versus people who hadn't grown up with texting and YouTubing and doing a bit of research for homework and sending photos, and all in the same breath, by the way. That's how young people are doing today, versus those that haven't. And the neural pathways are very different. So there are a lot of underlying things. So we're trying to, at the moment, we're just looking at the big umbrella picture. Where is the world going with this? And consumers are happy to pay a little bit more for something that they know is clean business. So if we look at the Whole Foods market, which came originally out of the States, and when I lived in Kensington, there used to be one on my next street corner, I can guarantee you that every time I walked out of there, I'd spent just a little bit more than I might have somewhere else.
Are you talking about organically grown foods?
Yes,
and
fair trade and what have you. But I was happy to spend that little bit more because I knew that every single link of that chain through to that food that I would consume would go back to fair trade.
Okay, I think, and I hear that, and I do think that there's definitely a movement and people are doing that. But at the end of the day, you've got poverty that is growing. You have a population worldwide where, I mean, we hit a mark, the 7 billion mark,
Yes.
and that is absolutely frightening. And so people, we're talking about people who have very little money. How consciously can they live?
We often,
Are you saying are you saying the responsibility is then
the
up
responsibility
to the
is government and business, yeah, and down to every single one of us in all of our actions every single day. So when we bring it back down to the individual, so we started off with a big sort of umbrella view of what this looks like and where it's going. When we start with, well, how can I make that kind of change? Because it's too big for me. It's world, it's globe, it's our planet. We've just talked about finding another planet like ours. Ultimately, all that we can manage is ourselves in any given moment. And if each one of us just had to be a little bit more conscious about how we go about doing things collectively, we're awesome, absolutely awesome. So we can bring it right back down to the individual, how we raise our children.
It's up to the individual, though, isn't it?
It is, very much so. So when you're in a position of power where you're actually managing thousands of people in a workplace, or 500 or 5, what effect can you have in that environment and on the business that you do?
Okay, so you are being consciously aware of your decisions that you're making,
Yes.
the impact that it could be having over
Yes.
individuals, on people at large, and that you say is definitely the trend. Do you think, I mean, this is the beginning stages of it, do you think that it's going to just really radically change the way people do business and the way people interact in business?
I think the world changed inextricably forever in September 2008, and I happened to be in London at that moment in time, and the extraordinary impact on people around me was quite flabbergasting. I don't know if people use that word anymore.
I do. Flabbergasting.
Flabbergasting.
I just have.
And the interesting thing about that was that the great and the good fell alongside the average and the poor. This financial impact on the world didn't make choices. It didn't leave the wealthy and just concentrate on the middle market or the poor man. It hit absolutely everyone. And I think in South Africa we've been a little protected through monetary policy and what have you. Saying that, if countries fall elsewhere, the impact and knock-on effect to us here is coming. And it's coming in harder and tougher terms. And that brings people back to a slightly more, I hesitate to use the word spiritual, especially when it comes to business, because...
Well, looking for a greater meaning. Surely attaching yourself to something. Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So there are lots of words that we can attach to this. And when we look now, there's some amazing research coming out. I'm actually coaching somebody at the moment who's writing a book on conscious leaders driving conscious business, who is also a consciousness coach. And when we look at the trend, and we've now got sufficient data to be able to produce some research, solid research from amazing foundations, we can see that conscious businesses are more profitable. And what does conscious business mean? It means that you give it away for free, which sounds mad. So what you're doing...
Yes.
I don't want anyone to take off and run at this moment in time. But we've actually shown that if you can deliver value to community, you can deliver value to people, you can honour their work-life balance, and you can actually do clean business, you are more profitable. Full stop.
Listen, it's a wonderful trend. But let me ask you this. As a consciousness coach,
Yes.
it must be incredibly challenging because you're going way beyond telling someone this is how you ask open-ended questions. What are your dreams and what are your hopes, and where do you... It's going beyond that, because you're going to someone's morals and their values and how they see the world, how they perceive others. Because when you're talking about a consciousness, it really is the relationship they have with themselves and with others and the world.
Yes.
And that's intense.
This is the most wonderful job on the planet, I have to tell you. So the interesting thing about consciousness coaching or mindfulness coaching, or let's just take good old professional coaching and personal brand or leadership brand coaching, the idea is that living in one's comfort zone is probably the most uncomfortable place to be on the planet.
We just think it's comfortable.
We think it's comfortable.
Okay.
So if we look at evolution and the way that energy moves forward, so too must we move forward. So when we work through coaching, we really just shift people 20% out of their comfort zone each time. If we're out of our comfort zone by 10% either way, we don't notice it and nothing changes. 20% feels a little uncomfortable, but we'll do it. And that allows the real shift in our being. Niki, I can't stress this enough. Our being drives our doing. There is no point in us messing around with people's behaviors on the external, unless the being on the inside is driving something in a slightly different way. Give people 25% out of their comfort zone, it'll never happen. It's too big to achieve. So it's very finely tuned.
Little chunks.
And it's little steps in front of the other, one by
and then
one.
it's a huge movement. When you look back,
Yes.
you've come a long way.
Yes. When I look back at when I started my company 6 years ago, I wanted to call it 1 degree, but unfortunately the .com was taken, so I had to shift a little bit. Because 1 degree of change ultimately changes everything. And you cannot change, you cannot help but change everything until you change one small thing. And even if it's the way that you go about greeting people in the morning, or it's the way that you go about handling business negotiations, or dealing with the committee at school, it covers all of life. Change one small thing and you cannot help but change everything.
Well, I want to talk about change. We're going to take a break, and after that, because there is this fear attached to change, to this unknown.